Picture this: Rome, 222 AD. Nighttime torches cast ominous shadows across the Praetorian Guard's military camp. In an atmosphere thick with tension and the rhythmic beat of drums, an 18-year-old youth makes his way towards the gates, full of hope for impending honors. He is yet to realize that instead of triumph, a deadly trap awaits him, its outcome already predetermined by ruthless fate. This unfortunate young man was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus, who entered the annals of history as Elagabalus, an emperor whose rule challenged established Roman traditions and who paid an exorbitant price for this audacity. In just 4 years, this boy experienced a dizzying ascent from a humble priest of an Eastern temple to an all-powerful ruler, only to swiftly become an object of universal hatred and an enemy of his own empire. However, what is striking is not so much the brevity of his life, but rather his extravagant style of rule. He dared to replace the Roman gods with an alien Eastern cult, transform the imperial palace into an arena for scandalous and indecent rituals, and forced the powerful Roman elite to bow to his excessive whims. But a marital union proved fatal, sparking a storm of indignation in the Senate and igniting the flames of his downfall. This emperor's fate was sealed not by a bloody battle, but by a scandalous wedding. In this captivating story, the reader will witness the incredible rise of a young emperor to the pinnacle of power in ancient Rome, and also see how his extravagant lifestyle generated a wave of hatred and conspiracies. The narrative will lead through dark and little-known pages of the Roman Empire's history, prompting reflection on the reasons for this ruler's tragic end: religious fanaticism, abuse of power, or excessive pride. Rome attempted to consign his name to oblivion, employing the practice of damnatio memoriae, but the truth about Elagabalus continues to intrigue historians to this day. It all began long before the emperor's name resounded across Rome in the Syrian city of Emesa. Modern homes, lost amidst the boundless sands, here stood the temple of Elagabalus, dedicated to the sun god. The symbol of this deity was not a familiar image or statue, but a mysterious black conical stone, said to have fallen from the heavens. This enigmatic object was not merely a focus of worship, but a focal point of political power and influence. Pilgrims from all corners of the empire flocked to Emesa, drawn by rumors of miracles and riches. Along with them arrived caravans laden with gold, precious spices, exquisite Eastern silks, and slaves. The temple of Elagabalus became a thriving center, combining the functions of a bank, a market, and an influential political organization. However, what caused the most concern among Romans was another aspect of life in Emesa: ritual prostitution. Young men and women participated in sacred ceremonies, which stood in stark contrast to Rome's more restrained religious traditions. It was in this atmosphere, surrounded by luxury, power, and rituals, that Romans found abhorrent that Elagabalus, the future emperor whose name would forever remain in the annals of history, grew up. At the epicenter of these events emerges the figure of Julia Maesa, the grandmother of the notorious Elagabalus. As the sister of the influential Empress Julia Domna, she possessed a profound understanding of the mechanisms of imperial power. Following the tragic death of her nephew Caracalla, who had occupied the Roman throne, the family fell from favor and was sent into exile. However, Maesa, a woman of indomitable will, refused to reconcile herself with the loss of former grandeur. Instead of submitting to fate, she devised an ingenious plan in which a 14-year-old priest was to become a key figure in a complex political game. She had all the necessary resources at her disposal: the temple's immense treasures, influential family connections rooted in the imperial dynasty, and a grandson raised from an early age as the embodiment of a deity. Like an unseen architect, she guided the course of events, predetermining the future. But how to convince battle-hardened soldiers to believe in a mere boy? The answer lay in skilled propaganda. Mesa skillfully spread rumors that Elagabalus was not only the grandson of a powerful dynasty, but also the illegitimate son of Emperor Caracalla. The veracity of these claims was irrelevant. In turbulent times, rumors are valued far above truth. Coins bearing his image were mass-produced, and solemn processions were organized where the youth appeared before the people in imperial robes, artfully blending Syrian rituals with Roman symbolism. Before the troops, he presented himself not merely as a boy, but as a being marked by divine favor, an heir not only by blood, but by divine right. Early on the morning of 16th May 218, Julia Maesa presented her grandson to the soldiers of the 3rd Legion at Raphanea. In an atmosphere resembling a theatrical performance, the legionaries proclaimed Elagabalus emperor, after which he officially adopted the name Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus. The reigning emperor Macrinus was not about to tolerate such a turn of events and gathered his troops in Antioch. A brief but bloody civil war erupted. Despite the numerical superiority of Macrinus's forces, Elagabalus had two significant advantages: the temple's immense treasures, which allowed him to bribe soldiers and secure their loyalty, and religious propaganda, convincing the soldiers that they were fighting for a divine appointee. The outcome of the battle was predetermined. Macrinus suffered a crushing defeat, was captured and executed along with his son. Thus, a 14-year-old boy became the ruler of the world's greatest empire. However, the methods by which he came to power, bribery, religious manipulation, and the cruelty displayed at the dawn of his reign, became an ominous harbinger of future events. Arriving in Rome in 219, Elagabalus behaved not as an emperor seeking to honor the city's age-old traditions, but as a religious fanatic determined to change everything. He ordered the construction of an enormous temple on the Palatine Hill in close proximity to the imperial palace and placed there the principal sacred object of his cult, the black stone from Emesa. But he did not merely limit himself to introducing a new deity into the Roman pantheon. Elagabalus proclaimed himself a supreme god and ordered the most revered symbols of Rome to be transferred to his new sanctuary, the eternal flame of Vesta, the sacred shields of Mars, and even the Palladium, which, according to legend, protected Troy. This was tantamount to declaring to all Rome, "Your gods bow before mine." The emperor transformed the eternal city into a theatrical stage, where he himself played the lead role. During lavish processions, he donned exotic Eastern tunics, richly adorned with gold threads and sparkling gemstones. He personally pulled sacred chariots and forced Roman senators, accustomed to dignified decorum, to participate in ritual dances, which for them was the ultimate humiliation and a completely undignified activity. The cult ceremonies included frenzied chanting, public self-flagellation, and overt sexual rituals involving young men and women. What for the emperor was an expression of deep devotion to the sun god, for most Romans was nothing short of abhorrent blasphemy. The Roman elite, raised in a spirit of strict solemnity and iron discipline, was now forced to submit to the insane whims of the young ruler, who used his imperial power as a stage for his personal, outrageous spectacle. The ruler's religious reforms already posed a serious challenge to established traditions, but his personal life became a true shock to conservative Rome. In just 4 years, he entered into 5 marriages, each more scandalous and outrageous than the last. First, he married Julia Cornelia Paula, a woman from an aristocratic family, in an attempt to gain some legitimacy in the eyes of the Roman nobility. Then his chosen bride was Aquilia Severa, a Vestal virgin, which shocked the entire city, as Vestals took a vow of celibacy and had to maintain chastity under penalty of cruel death. Finally, he married Heracles, a fair-haired slave of Carian origin, whom he elevated to be his husband and closest advisor. At this extravagant ceremony, the emperor himself adopted the role of a wife, calling himself queen and beloved. These provocative gestures were not merely youthful whims or extravagant antics. They were direct and audacious provocations against the Senate, the military, and the entire traditional Roman system of values. Each new marriage was a deliberate message of power, a way to demonstrate clearly that he could trample upon Rome's most sacred laws with impunity, or so he thought. Senators hated him, priests feared him, and even the praetorians, the emperor's personal guard, began to openly grumble. Rome was in a state of constant tension, like a taut string. The emperor not only ruled, but seemed to revel in the public humiliation of those around him, deriving a perverse pleasure from it. Elagabalus transformed the heart of the empire into a temple where his deity was worshipped with unprecedented extravagance, and simultaneously into an arena for unrestrained excesses that were impossible to ignore. However, as it turned out, this was just the beginning. Up until this point, Roman society had shown remarkable tolerance for religious eccentricities, scandalous marriages, and extravagant rituals. But in 220, the young emperor committed an act that struck terror even into his closest supporters. He forced his young 12-year-old cousin, Alexianus, to participate in a marriage ceremony that shocked all of Rome. Chroniclers of the time recount that the boy was dressed in female attire and presented to the people as the emperor's spouse. Senators and high-ranking officers were forced to attend this humiliating ritual, and many of them left the ceremony in deep indignation, realizing that the emperor had crossed an unforgivable line. But more important than the act itself were its political repercussions. From then on, in the eyes of the Roman elite, Elagabalus appeared not merely as an eccentric ruler, but as a true tyrant, using his own family as a tool for humiliation and a display of unlimited power. Julia Maesa, the woman who had once brought her grandson to power, realized that her creation had turned into a monster, threatening the very existence of the dynasty. With her characteristic cunning, she began to promote Alexianus, the unwitting participant in the scandalous marriage, as a legitimate alternative for the succession. Presenting him as heir to the throne meant not only the salvation of the family, but also an opportunity to unite the Senate and the army against Elagabalus. It was Julia Maesa who convinced the emperor to officially adopt his cousin and proclaim him Caesar, thereby making him his legal heir. This step, as it turned out, was the first and perhaps most crucial step towards Heliogabalus's own demise. Heliogabalus, whose reign was marked by extravagance and scandals, soon felt the ominous breath of conspiracy around his throne. In an attempt to consolidate his power, he gave a secret order for the elimination of Alexianus, his cousin and heir. However, Praetorians loyal to Alexianus, whose loyalty to the emperor was already questionable, refused to carry out this order. Moreover, respect for the young heir grew within the army, overshadowing Heliogabalus's own authority. In a fit of rage and despair, the emperor took a rash step, threatening to disband the Praetorian Guard and replace it with Syrian soldiers whose loyalty, he believed, was unwavering. This challenge proved to be a fatal mistake. By threatening those who were meant to guard his life, Heliogabalus effectively signed his own death warrant. In March 222, the Praetorians, plotting a coup, invited the emperor and Alexianus to a ceremony of renewed loyalty at their camp. Heliogabalus, blinded by belief in his unshakable power, accepted the invitation. However, when he arrived, the soldiers unanimously paid homage only to Alexianus, ignoring the emperor. Humiliated and enraged, Heliogabalus furiously ordered the execution of everyone present, but this order proved to be the last of his reign. The very guards who had once elevated him to the throne drew their swords and furiously attacked him and his mother, Julia Soemius. Their bodies were brutally beheaded, dragged through the streets of Rome, and ultimately thrown into the river Tiber. On 11th March 222, the Eternal City witnessed the tragic conclusion of one of the darkest and most scandalous chapters in its history. History has preserved for us the tragic figure of Elagabalus, the young emperor whose attempt to impose an alien cult on Rome ended in brutal reprisal. Betrayed by his own bodyguards, he was killed, and his body, along with that of his mother, was desecrated and cast into the waters of the Tiber, like the bodies of state criminals. The retribution was not limited to physical annihilation. The Senate decreed damnatio memoriae, the official condemnation of the emperor's memory. His statues were toppled, his name erased from commemorative plaques, and any mention of him expunged from the annals of history. Rome sought to consign him to complete oblivion as if he had never existed. The fallen tyrant was succeeded by young Alexianus, still almost a child, who ascended the throne as Alexander Severus. Ironically, the boy who had been an unwitting witness and victim of the previous regime's humiliations became a symbol of hope for the empire's renewal. However, the trauma he experienced left an indelible mark on his soul. As historians note, Alexander ruled wisely and cautiously, but never fully escaped the shadow of his cousin and the painful memories of his childhood experiences. Rome succeeded in consigning Elagabalus's name to oblivion, but it could not erase the scars he left in the hearts of his contemporaries. The story of Elagabalus is not merely a narrative about an eccentric young ruler. It is a stark reminder of the price paid for unchecked power, exercised without regard for public opinion and tradition. His religious reforms demonstrate the danger of forcibly imposing radical changes without considering established customs. His personal vices show how private life can become a political weapon, capable of destroying even the most powerful empire, and his tragic demise serves as proof that even an all-powerful ruler depends on the loyalty of his entourage. History knows many examples where empires have tried to consign undesirable rulers to oblivion, yet their memory paradoxically endures. Ancient Rome, the embodiment of might and grandeur, sought to erase the name of one young emperor from the annals of history, but his shadow still hovers over the ruins of the former empire. His image became an ominous warning for future generations. It serves as a reminder that when unlimited power meets unbridled arrogance, it inevitably leads to catastrophe. Thus ingloriously ended the life of a ruler who dared to challenge Rome and its gods and suffered a crushing defeat. Centuries later, we still remember the one whom Rome so desperately tried to consign to oblivion. A pertinent question arises: is it truly possible to erase a person from history, or does the very attempt to consign them to oblivion merely immortalize their name in the annals of memory? This question remains open, prompting us to ponder the nature of power, memory, and immortality.